Hi, my name is Tyger and welcome to my Screencast. This Screencast is a part of my independent inquiry blog, which is called Tyger's Teachnology. When I made the blog, I set out to research the ways in which technological literacy interacts with literacy in the classroom and the ways in which they change and shape one another. Over the course of my research, I've read 5 articles, which I hope will speak into this topic and shed some light on the research question. These articles are Game Development as a Pathway to Information Technology Literacy by Mark Frydenberg, Growing Misconception of Technology, Investigation of Elementary Students' Recognition of and Reasoning about Technological Artifacts by Mehmet Ferhat, Are Gender Differences in Perceived and Demonstrated Technology Significant? It Depends on the Model by Albert Ritzopt et al., Technology and At-Risk Young Readers and Their Classrooms by Blockowitz et al., and Improving Technology Literacy, Does It Open Doors to Traditional Content by Eugene Judson. This screencast is intended to be a summary of my findings, as well as an analysis of my findings of the commonalities among all the articles. I'm intending to show the relationships between the articles as well. So the main themes that I found among all of the articles are access, improved technological literacy, and improved literacy. As you can see, I've put these in a flowchart because I've found that in all of the readings that I did, these things tend to lead to one another. Greater access to technology tends to lead to an improved technological literacy in students, and this in turn leads to improved literacy among students as well. In the rest of the screencast, I'm going to talk about each of these themes more in depth, and at the end, I will summarize how I think these are linked with one another. So the first main theme I found was technological access. I found that there were 3 components that sort of added up to technological access, and as such, I've made a diagram of a funnel here, which is going to have some components being added to it. The first component here is having a high socioeconomic status, otherwise known as SES, and that's how I'm going to refer to it for the rest of the screencast. Several of these articles I read spoke about SES, and about the general consensus, it was that if a student has a higher SES, they're more likely to have interacted with the technology that leads to improved technological literacy. Frydenberg did his study on college students who were required to take an IT course, meaning that these students would need the income required to be in the class at the college level. Ferhat also found in his study, which he did on elementary students in Turkey, that higher SES students were better able to navigate the identification of technological artifacts, and they knew more about technology as a whole. As a result, having a higher amount of money in the student's household increases their chances of interacting with the technology needed for them to be technologically literate. The second component here is parental education levels. This was mainly pointed out by Ferhat, who found that parental education levels were higher and they corresponded with students who knew more about technology as a whole. None of the other sources talks about parental education levels explicitly, but it was kind of implied in some studies like Frydenberg's when you consider that higher parental education levels correspond with college attendance. The basic concept behind this component is that the more education a student's parents have completed, the better access to technology they have. This would also imply that parents who have a higher education levels can get higher paying jobs and thus afford to be able to bring technology into their homes. Now, the final component is gender. This one is actually really interesting because in his study, Ritzopt set out to ask whether gender differences in technology literacy are significant, and he actually found that they were. He found that girls actually scored higher than boys in assessments that measured technology literacy, and it shows that a gender gap, which was previously thought to exist, is now closed. He theorized that girls have a higher interest in learning information and computer technology skills, otherwise known as ICT skills, than boys do. And this is something that's still being researched, but I think it's worth considering that students' gender seems to have an impact on their access to technology. And when we add all that up, we get technological access. Each of these factors plays a part in this, so it's very important that as educators we try to ensure that our students have adequate technological access, especially if they're more marginalized students who don't necessarily meet all of these conditions. So the next theme in my research was improved technological literacy. Again, we have 3 components to this idea, but the way I've organized this one is into a graphic with different balls surrounding it and arrows pointing towards the technological literacy. So the first of these components is confidence. Multiple researchers, including Friedenberg, Blockowitz, and Judson, spoke about how greater access to technology leads to increased confidence when using technology, and that in turn leads to improved technological literacy. When students are more confident with the technology that they're using, they're more likely to take risks and make mistakes in learning how to use it. The second component here is practice. This is one tenet that all the researchers I read agreed on. They found that the students who had more practice with using the technology had improved technology literacy. In fact, they all concluded that it was essential for teachers to give students that practice so that they can better acquire these skills. And it makes sense. Greater access to technology leads to better practice and technological literacy, which in turn leads to an improvement in that technological literacy. The final component we have here is attitude. Multiple of the researchers, including Farrat, Judson, and Blockowitz, they found that students who had a better attitude about literacy, or technology literacy, were better able to use the technology they have. They were more likely to make mistakes, they were more confident, and they had better problem-solving skills. The researchers also found that teachers who had more open attitudes about technology in the classroom saw students who had a general improvement in technology literacy as a whole. And as you can see, these three components kind of all merge into one, the improved technological literacy, and I have arrows here pointing towards it just to show the relationship here. So the final component that we have is improved literacy. This is, of course, the goal of every classroom, but as a result of our previous slide, improved technology literacy, this theme also has three components which kind of make it up but are also results of improved literacy, and you'll see that in a second. So the first of these is standardized assessment. So multiple studies in this research, like Blockowitz and Judson, they use standardized tests to measure improvements in general literacy. All of the studies that did this found that students who had greater technological literacy also had greater general literacy. So through the use of online literacy programs, a lot of these students scaffolded their general literacy skills through their technological literacy skills. The second component we have here is problem-solving skills. Students develop problem-solving skills through their increased use of technology and their improved technological literacy. So these skills translate over to their general literacy, where they're more likely to have the tools they need to solve problems related to different discourses and literacies. Blockowitz, Friedenberg, and Judson, they all found that problem-solving skills that students learned from their technological literacy also helped them to acquire problem-solving skills in general literacy as well. And the final component we have is, again, confidence, which correlates to the confidence acquired in technological literacy, which I previously discussed. Students who are more confident about their use of technology will be more confident about general literacy as well. This is really important, especially considering that confidence is essential for literacy. It's important for students to be able to make mistakes and learn from them in order for them to properly learn any form of literacy. As I said before, each of these components doesn't necessarily contribute to improved literacy, but is rather an offshoot of it, because each of these components in reality is a result, but it's also something that might lead to it. So I've sort of made them stems off of improved literacy, as you can see, and so that sort of shows the interesting relationship that they have there. So the final diagram that I have here is our three main themes again. You can see that I have improved literacy, improved technological literacy, and access, but they're in sort of a cycle. When an individual has greater technological access, this will give them the components they need to have improved technological literacy. This in turn will allow students to have improved literacy in general, and it sort of makes a cycle, as you can see. Having greater literacy will allow students to meet the conditions for access, as they will be more likely to have greater SES and parental education levels. So in this way, all of these ideas lead to one another, and it just becomes a cycle. Yeah, so that's the end of the information that I had to present for you today. If there are any questions or you're interested in reading my findings for these studies and articles, feel free to check out my blog, tigersteachnology.wordpress.com. Also, feel free to leave comments on this video. Any discussions or questions you have would be welcome. Thank you for your attention.